Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, December 12th, 2016. I am Dave Biddle, joined by the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. Well, Luke Fickell, of course, is the new head coach at the University of Cincinnati. Just first of all, your reaction to that news.
I'm happy for Luke. I mean, let's be honest here. That's a perfect job for somebody like him who's an Ohio guy, you know. But on the other hand, I'm kind of sad to see him go. He's one of the best linebacker coaches in the country. I put in the bucket on Sunday that I don't know if anybody's really done more for Ohio State for the last quarter century than Luke. I mean, you can make the argument he is Mr. Buckeye through everything he's been through for this university. I mean, it's very rare to see somebody stick around somewhere as long as Luke did. And you don't stick around somewhere as long as Luke did, like a place like Ohio State, unless you have a lot to bring to the table. So, you know, there's some people who are going to bring up reasons why they're not happy to see, or they're not sad to see Luke leave, but in the end, he's been a very big positive force for the program. So I think he'll do very well at Cincinnati.
And obviously the big question is now, who is going to replace him? We know it's not going to be Charlie Strong. That was a pipe dream anyway. I thought it was,
no way.
Just need to put his name out there just because of the ties with Meyer. And frankly, I didn't think Greg Schiano last year was feasible, but that happened. But we know Charlie Strong is going to be the head coach at South Florida. Who are some names that you think will be in contention to replace Luke, and who do you want to see replace Luke?
So, my opinion on this is that we're going to see something completely off the board. Much like when Urban was hired initially at Ohio State, there were all these names thrown out about who was going to have call plays on offense, right? All these big names here and there, and we were all wondering what he was going to do. And he went and picked some guy who happened to be the offensive coordinator at Iowa State, of all places, right? And I remember thinking, who is this guy? Well, apparently he's smart. The guy's name was Tom Herman. He's now the head coach at Texas, right? One of Urban's best traits is the fact that whenever he loses assistants, he goes out and replaces them with assistants who are just as good. We're talking recruiting when kids decommit. Well, Urban just finds a better one, right? I'm not saying Urban's going to find somebody better than Luke, but Urban's going to find somebody extremely talented that can recruit the state of Ohio extremely well. I am of the opinion that he's already done a pretty darn good job by keeping Kerry Coombs in the fold, first of all. Kerry Coombs has taken over that co-defensive coordinator slot that Luke Fickell had, because Kerry probably would have gone to Cincinnati with Luke if he hadn't had some sort of bump up at Ohio State. That said, I think you're going to find somebody who's going to bring in as a linebackers coach, and only a linebackers coach, who's fairly young, who has a really bright future. If you look at that defensive staff, you have a ton of experience on it right now. You know, you've got Greg Schiano, who's pretty much a mid-level Power 5 head coach, who just happens to be our defensive coordinator at this point. Kerry Coombs, who's been around for a while. You know, those guys are, and Larry Johnson, who's the defensive line coach supreme, right? So whoever's a linebackers coach, you can have a younger guy there. There's a spot where you can grow and mold somebody into a bigger role that Urban sees with potential. So I don't even want to throw names out because I think he's going to go for somebody that maybe most people aren't familiar with. That once that person gets here, we go, hey, that's a really good hire.
One name that's been tossed out there is Billy Davis, former NFL defensive coordinator with 3 different teams, also was linebackers coach for the Browns for a short stint. So on one hand, it's very good that he has, just having experience as an NFL defensive coordinator with 3 different teams, that looks good on the resume. Now, his defenses were not very good, including most recently the Philadelphia Eagles with Chip Kelly, although I would submit if Chip Kelly is your head coach, you do not want to be the defensive coordinator when Chip Kelly is your head coach. It's not good for defenses. But Billy Davis has been hanging around Ohio State's program all season as just an advisor. He is a linebackers coach at heart. He's close with Urban. Could you envision Billy Davis stepping into that role?
No, and here's why. Can he recruit? Plain and simple. The guy has barely had anything to do in college. He's an NFL guy, and my simple rule is Urban's not going to hire anybody who can't recruit his pants off. He's not going to go out there and try to replace the energy that Luke Fickell brought. Let's face it, Luke Fickell was a very, very good recruiter for Ohio State.
Fantastic recruiter. Yes.
He was Tressel's ace during the day. Back when Luke Fickell had to drag dead weights like Jim Bowman around in recruiting, right? Luke Fickell was the guy who brought it. He was the closer outside of JT on those teams. I mean, essentially, you had occasional guys who recruited fairly well, like Taylor Johnson and Darrell Hazel, but half those coaching staff didn't give a damn about recruiting, right? Like, Tressel's offensive staff towards the end was a bunch of his buddies. So, I mean, that's the thing is Luke Fickell was a very good recruiter. You're not going to have some guy who's older, maybe doesn't have the same fire for recruiting, and certainly doesn't have the experience to recruit. You're going to have somebody who's a mid-level kind of guy right now, has 4 to 5 years of experience as a linebacker coach, maybe at a smaller school, who maybe has had more success in a recruiting trail but none of us have noticed it because he's pulling 3-star guys to 2-star destinations or something. Urban's going to look for somebody who can wow in an interview and has that fire to go out and get talent. So all these big names that they're throwing out there, again, I don't see it happening. Unless, Charlie Strong was obviously a pipe dream, though him taking the USF job to me is ridiculous because that's below his level where he's going to go. It's a 2-year rental, and it's another bad breakup waiting to happen. But for Urban, he's going to find somebody who can recruit. He's not going to bring in somebody who's like, I coordinated bad NFL defenses. They don't need that. Right? Plain and simple, they don't need that. What they need is a young guy who can go into houses, connect with kids, and bring talent to Ohio State, who also might not be a bad coach at the linebacker position. So, again, I think it's somebody that nobody's talking about right now. We have no idea who it's going to be at this point, but it's going to be somebody who can recruit. I can guarantee that.
That's the exact same reason I had pause about Billy Davis. I will say, maybe there's a chance, and Urban knows him, very well, that even though he's been in the NFL for years, maybe he's a guy with a type of personality that would be a good recruiter. And Urban sees him that he would be a good recruiter, even though he has not done it in years. He spent 1 year as a grad assistant at Michigan State, like way back in the 90s, has been in the NFL ever since. But I agree with you. I think, but I just wanted to throw that out there that maybe he's a guy that just because he's been in the NFL, maybe he could still be a good recruiter. But I'm with you. I hope Urban finds an established, or not even necessarily an established, a young up and coming, hot shot recruiter. Because this guy's not going to be in charge of the defense. He's going to be working under Greg Schiano, under Kerry Coombs. And speaking of Kerry Coombs, as you mentioned earlier, how about that report that was out there? Kerry Coombs is definitely following Luke Fickell to Cincinnati. Oh, until he's not, until Kerry Coombs threw water on that on Twitter, came out and said, no, I'm staying at Ohio State. It sounds like obviously Ohio State's sweetening the pot. They haven't made it official yet, but they said, he's going to have an expanded role. So like you assumed, probably going to be co-defensive coordinator now, in addition to being corners coach, in addition to being special teams coordinator. Going to get a nice raise. But that whole situation was funny to follow when it looked like Combs was definitely following Luke, and then nope, Kerry Coombs is staying in Columbus, which is interesting because Kerry Coombs is like Mr. Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's the thing that I think we all assumed was going to happen because of his background. And by the way, where did Ohio State get him from? The University of Cincinnati. So I think the thing that makes the most sense for Kerry would have been to follow as Luke's defensive coordinator. So Urban came in and essentially said, you're going to help coordinate the defense this year. I don't know what he said beyond that because, let's face it, how long is Schiano going to be here? But I think he told Kerry, you're going to be involved heavily in the game planning on defense this year. I need you. I can't lose both Luke and you at the same time. And, I think it's a great thing for Ohio State keeping Kerry Coombs around because it's one thing to lose one of your great recruiters like Luke Fickell. Well, Kerry Coombs is also a great recruiter. All right. And if you look at the defensive guys, Larry Johnson, while he has all these great players that he's brought into college football and sent off to the NFL on the defensive line, he is an older guy at this point, right? He's more of the grandfatherly type to a lot of these kids in recruiting. You have Greg Schiano, who we don't know if he's going to be here in a year. And that's not a bad thing because he's an extremely talented coach. But having a guy like Kerry Coombs as your fire-breathing recruiter on the defensive side of the football, then you just lost your other one in Luke Fickell, so you needed to keep Kerry. I think the recruiting thing was a major part of why it was so important to keep Kerry Coombs, but I think staff stability is another one too. Keeping him was a coup. Urban, of course, was happy that one of his assistants was getting a head coaching job, especially at a decent job like Cincinnati that's going to fit Luke's skill set perfectly. But he couldn't let Kerry go with him, plain and simple, and this is what he had to do to keep him.
If Ohio State loses Ed Warinner to Western Kentucky, which I don't think that's going to happen, it wouldn't shock me if it did, or if Tim Beck finds new work, or if Ed Warinner gets a head coaching job and takes Tim Beck with him, if there is a spot open on Ohio State's offensive coaching staff, I would love to see Kevin Wilson get the job as offensive coordinator as long as nothing else surfaces. Your thoughts on that?
Yep. That's all. I agree with you completely. Look, there's this, if this was Tim Beckman type stuff, and let's be real clear on this, if this was Tim Beckman type stuff where he was rushing injured kids back, was making concussion kids play, look, none of that would apply for allowing him to be part of Ohio State staff. He'd be blackballed from football, period. But Indiana didn't do that. Indiana talked about philosophical differences, and honestly, Indiana's one of those schools where they have like this student-athlete charter of rights and everything, and their AD is super hypersensitive to stuff. And by the way, here's the thing about Kevin Wilson. Yes, he yells a lot. That's absolutely the case. You hear stories about him being a hard-ass yelling guy. No question about it. And maybe the head coaching role at Indiana, trying to turn them from garbage into decency, took a lot of stress. But there is no question in my mind of two things. One, unless Kevin Wilson was hitting concussion kids with a bat in the head or something, I don't see this being something like the Tim Beckman situation. I don't think he's blackballed from coaching in the future. And two, I don't think anybody's going to believe that Urban Meyer's going to let any like that go on here. Kevin Wilson would be an assistant coach under Urban. Urban never has ever had allegations of player issues like that, right? So if Urban comes in and says, look, this is my program, we're not going to do that stuff, then I believe that would be essentially the end outcome here. And this is sort of a moot point. And here's the reality, folks. Anybody wants to talk about all these other coaches who are available out there, they all pale in comparison to Kevin Wilson from a football perspective. Kevin Wilson took Indiana with like no talent to be one of the best offenses year in, year out in the Big Ten. Kevin Wilson, who's at Oklahoma, turns Sam Bradford into a Heisman Trophy winner. Kevin Wilson at Ohio State next year turns J.T. Barrett into the Heisman Trophy winner. And by the way, Ohio State probably rampages through their schedule next year with an offense that's remotely capable. There is by far no one who compares to Kevin Wilson for this role. So unless other stuff comes out, and Urban, of course, will vet the heck out of it, but unless something else comes out, Kevin Wilson's by far the top choice. And I don't care if you got to dump Warner and Beck at the same time, even if they don't get other jobs to make it happen, because that's what's best for Ohio State.
Great stuff as always from the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. You can catch his column, The Bucket, every Sunday. It's still posted to the Front Row message board. The Sunday Bucket of Gratitude was yesterday's edition, so make sure you check that out if you haven't already. Thanks again to Bax, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. I appreciate it. I hope you have a great day. Let's hear some Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.